God, I just thank you for a time to get together with these sweet ladies and just share, Lord, the things, hopefully, God, that you want me to share. I just pray that you would slow my mind and put aside all the things that kept me here and that made me flustered, and we just pray for printers that would work, and for children who would take their naps, and just thank you for a nice Monday afternoon, and thank you for sweet Besta and everything she always puts into these girls and these times, and just pray, God, most of all, that this would be a blessing to them. And we pray for just a sweet time together. Amen. So she asked me to share these things, and I thought, okay, where do I kind of start? Because I haven't been single or in college in a while. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about me, because then you kind of know why she asked me to share, or where I'm at. I'm 33 now. I got married really young. I mean, young-ish for the national average, right? I was 20 when I got married, and I was so I was single for a couple years. I was single in high school, obviously, and then in college. But I did get married young. So I was looking back and I was thinking, what can I share that would be a blessing? And then talking about marriage and all that. And I remembered then it just dawned on me I was in Bible school. And I don't know why I didn't think of that before. I don't even know if you knew that.
No.
That I was in Bible school. But I went to a Bible college when I was 18 and when I was 19, and it was a similar thing with a small group of women. And so I lived in a house. Do you guys know Hume Lake? Have anyone ever been to Hume Lake? Yeah. Have you heard of their Joshua program? Probably they have a Bible school up there. You heard of it? Well, have you ever heard of Hume Lake? Yeah. You've heard about it. It's kind of a popular place for people to go in the summer and have summer camp. And they started in 2000. They did a college, a young program, a brand new baby Bible school. And so I went, and there was 11 girls and 12 guys, and we lived in this one little house, and the guys lived down the way. And so it just kind of reminds me a little bit of what you guys are doing, because you guys are in a small group of people, and you probably hang out a lot, right? I'm assuming you hang out all the time. So anyways, so that's kind of, those are the years that I really remember before I was married, when I could kind of relate to that whole season of, okay, Lord, what do you have for my life? There's so many cool things that are potentially going to happen, and I want to hear your voice. And so I kind of just wanted to start there, and then we'll talk a little bit about marriage and having kids and stuff. I would feel a lot more comfortable. I mean, this whole video thing totally trips me out. But I would feel more comfortable if you guys asked me questions, because then it's just more like a conversation. I left my coffee in the car, but I could have brought it in. I was thinking about bringing coffee for all of you, but I meant to ask you if that would have been okay. I should have. But do you guys drink coffee? Yeah? No? Yes? No? It'd be great if we could talk about it, because I'm happy to answer questions. I may be talking about something that you find really boring, or you might be curious about something else. So please do ask. Did I mention I was Scott's wife? Did I say that? You know Scott, right? Some of you do. You see him around here, the big tall guy that's always has Dr. Pepper or Monster or something.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you know Patty Eichen?
Yes. Yeah. It's my aunt.
My mom knows.
Oh, okay.
Auntie Patty.
Okay. Very cool. My aunt is Patty. She works at UCSB, and they're really involved with St. Rayfield's, right? Yeah. That's my aunt. Eichen is my maiden name, and it's kind of an unusual name, so people they either go, are you with the Mark Eichens or the Paul Eichens? So yeah, that's my aunt. So questions are good, please. They help me. And they help all of you guys. So if there's anything you're curious about or you want to ask more questions about, please do. Normally I'm sitting on my front porch, and we're talking in that kind of manner. I'm not used to sitting in a room with a camera on me. Yeah, the camera. Okay, so I went to Bible school. So go back a little bit further. I grew up in a Christian home, grew up in Santa Barbara, and my parents love the Lord, homeschooled us, which back in the day was super weird. Now people, if I say I'm homeschooling my kids now, they go, oh yeah, that's cool. It's a nice option. When I was a kid, it was so weird. Everyone was like, you're homeschooled? What? Like you don't go to school? And everyone gave us such a hard time. So now it's kind of nice that it's not as unusual. But back in the day, it was in the 80s, was when we were homeschooled, 80s and 90s. It's very strange, but it's great. I loved it. It was super fun. When I was in sixth grade, I think, at a sixth grade camp, I met Scott, and he was 20. We're 9 years apart, okay? And I was 11, right? And his girlfriend was my counselor. So his girlfriend was my camp, we were in the little cabin, and she was like, oh, Scott, and I was like, you are dating a weird guy. Like, I remember saying like that, he is so strange. Like, you're dating him? This is the guy you're with? And she was like, oh, he's wonderful. And I was like, okay. And I was 11, but I remember him because he's just kind of a character, And so then he was the camp counselor for my brother. So he and my brother started hanging out. So he and my brother started mountain biking. He was always around. So when I was in high school, I would like bring guys home, to meet my parents and hang out. And he'd be at dinner too. So we had a big house with people always over. And big old table, and we'd all be together, and he would be teasing me because he was hanging out with my brother, and I'd have some guy there, and he would just embarrass me, and I was so mortified. So he was kind of like this older brother type figure in my life growing up. And then then he moved away the last part of my high school years. He went to seminary, went down to Biola, and got his master's, and I broke up with or stopped seeing the guys I was seeing in high school. And then he moved home, and I was 17 or 18, I think. And we started all hanging out again, and it was kind of like, oh, I really like hanging out. But he was so much older than me, and I don't even think it was a thought because he was just a lot older than me. He was in his 20s, and I was starting to think about what I wanted to do with my life. I was 18. And so long story short, we ended up, these girls, it's crazy. It's hard to make this story short because it's sort of strange how do people end up together with that big of an age gap. But these girls that were interested in him got really envious of our sort of friendship, and so they made a big fuss to him and said, "You're hanging out with this young gal, and you shouldn't hang out with someone that young." And he was like, "Oh, I didn't even realize." And so he decided, I don't want to mess up anything to do with my reputation. I'm just going to completely ignore Rachel and not talk to her. And we had a lot of mutual friends. So it was horribly awkward because we'd go to the movies and he would just walk the other way. Like, he wouldn't talk to me. It was just drama. So, it was awkward. So then I guess he got like convicted or embarrassed about it at one point, and I thought he just turned into a jerk. I didn't know what happened. So then one day he took my car keys, and I couldn't find my keys anywhere. We were at a big mutual event, some church event, and I couldn't find my keys anywhere. I was like, where are my keys? So finally he came over and he's like, I have your keys. And I was like, why did you take my keys? Because he hadn't talked to me in months. And he's like, I really need to talk to you. I need to say I'm sorry. And I was like, what? So then he pulled me aside and we went out to coffee or something. And so we talked, and he was like, explained the whole thing, and one thing led to another. We became friends again, and then we started dating. And there's more stories, but I'm trying to make it brief because it's not all about that. But anyways, that's how we got together. And then I had already sort of made my plans. I was like, well, I got plans, so I'm doing things. So I went to Hume Lake for a year. And then actually right before that, I went to Papua New Guinea for a summer, which was really fun. And my mom was on the trip, and she's a nurse, and so she ran around the jungle doing all sorts of crazy things because my mom's kind of wild. And she would be like, come on, let's go. So I run around with her. We delivered a baby in the middle of the jungle in the middle of the night. One night, it was wild, and we did all sorts of, the stories, crazy things. So I thought, this is really fun. I want to be a nurse. That'd be great. So when I came home, I started applying to nursing school, went to Bible college, and my kind of thought was, all right, this Scott guy is cool, but maybe there's someone better. Like, maybe when I go to Bible school, I'll meet somebody. And so it was kind of nice to be able to, like, even though I was in that relationship, just kind of take a step back and not have him right in front of my face. Because one of the things that's hard when you're dating, and I think some of you are dating in this room. I know you're dating. Who else? Someone else is dating, maybe? You're dating too? I thought there was a couple people. Okay, I thought there was a couple people, but I don't know if you realize when you're face to face with a person that you're really attracted to and getting to know, you kind of stop thinking clearly sometimes, because you're just so delighted to be in their company. So it was kind of good to have a little bit of space just to be able to go, okay, is this really the guy that I want to spend the rest of my life with? So then when I got to Hume Lake, there was these great guys. I really loved hanging out with them. But it was really clear that, my love for Scott never really wavered. And we dated the whole time. And then when I got home, I jumped into nursing school and prereq, so studying all the time. And but we dated, and then he asked me to marry him. I think I was 19, then I got married when I was 20. So I'm not saying I recommend that because it's really, it is quick. But that's kind of what the Lord had for us, and that was sort of our story. And it's been great, and I don't regret it. It's a different thing to get married really young, just because you are still developing so much about what you want in your life and sort of the way you function and things. So if you get married really young, you just have to, your spouse has to allow you to stretch and grow and change, because you do change. Like I think about how I was when I was 20 and then 25 and 30. You do just change, but it's okay. So it can work. I'm not saying it doesn't, but so that's sort of our story. I went to finish nursing school after we were married. Then I was 23, and then I had our first baby when I was 25, and I just had our fourth a year ago. He's 1 year. So we just celebrated his birthday, and then Mother's Day. I know, I almost cried because he's getting so big. I'm really emotional about it because we gave away all of our baby stuff. We're like, we're done, no more. And that was, I don't know, I was just sort of emotional about it. Anyways, it's been really fun. But almost 8 years in diapers. It's a long time. It's a lot of diapers. I wish we had not done disposable diapers, but oh well, that's another side note. So singleness, I was trying to think, what can I share that is beneficial for you guys? And so I was looking in my Bible, and it's full of bookmarks made from Mother's Day from my kids. But I think I typed out this whole verse. I was looking to see, okay, what does the Lord say about singleness? And I know you guys have heard this a bunch of times, but Paul was kind of, I think people refer to what Paul said in 1 Corinthians often, like, my brother will sometimes say it, well, it's just better not to get married. It's the way that you can, focus on the Lord. But I think that God does talk about the time in your life when you're single. And in 1 Corinthians 7:34, I'll just read this because I typed it out here, it's faster. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world and how she can please her husband. So I was thinking, when you're single, and you guys, I think, are doing that right by going to Bible school. You're focusing on who Christ has called you to be. It's really easy in this world, I feel like, to think about what's the perfect guy going to be like. And when you're a little girl, you really dream about, like, my girls are starting to talk about boys, which freaks me out. But they're starting to think about and talk about it. And I think it's easy to focus on that instead of focusing on who you are and what who God has called you to be. And so I think that our culture is really focused on self. What does your profile look like? What have you accomplished? What schools have you gone to? And I think that as believers, as Christian women, we're supposed to be preparing ourselves for the woman that God wants us to be, and then the Lord will provide from there. And so I think my encouragement for you would be, already what you're doing, you're in Bible school, which is wonderful. You're learning more about the Lord, and that's just you will be such a blessing to your husband someday if that's what the Lord calls you to do. And I'm not saying that just because you're a young female, it means that you want to be married, because maybe you don't. So I'm not going to assume that you guys are like, I'm getting married. But if you do, and if the Lord has that for you, then starting out where you already are is fabulous, because you're working on just trying to learn to hear God's voice, which is really a challenge in our culture. I feel like we live in such a noisy, distracted culture because there's so much, like hyper communication and social media, and just there's so many things you can be doing all day long, and it's easy to not kind of get away and have that quiet time with the Lord. And so I think that focusing on who God wants you to be and letting him worry about who he's going to bring along. I also think too that Scott's really goofy, and he's not I don't think that like what some people might think is like an ideal husband, someone who, like, you walk in his office and you see all that goofy crazy stuff. He's always been really goofy, and I just think that sometimes, like, what the world would say, oh no, he's not like the ideal husband. I just feel like if some guy comes along who maybe the world would think is a little goofy, it's okay to go out with them. Like, I would just encourage you not to just reject someone because they don't look like super cool or hip, or they're like, Scott embarrasses me all the time. When we were dating, he used to embarrass me. Sometimes, he does it inadvertently, but he also does it on purpose. We used to walk down State Street and he would just push me into people all the time. And he thought it was so funny. We'd be walking and he would slowly like go this way. And so I'd be like, stop. And I'd literally bump, and I'm so sorry. Like, I just stumbled into them. It was mortifying, but he's just goofy. And it's terribly embarrassing. And he embarrasses me regularly. But and at the time in high school, I was actually dating this guy that was really together. Like, he had his life together. He wanted to be a doctor. He was just very, I don't know, he was just,
Normal.
Yes, he was not odd, he was not goofy, but I knew we'd be bored because he was way too much like me, way too. I thought we'd be so bored, very boring. I needed someone who would literally pushed me out of my comfort zone, so the Lord knew. But what was I saying? So I'm just encouraging you, don't be afraid to date someone who's a little bit goofy or maybe awkward, because none of us are perfect. And so I think sometimes, like, I know my girls are already starting to get into that dreamy state, and I know you get into a season sometimes where you think, oh, I'm looking for this guy that's just so, and it's like, well, none of us are just so. And so it's good to be willing to maybe take a chance on somebody that's a little bit goofy, because it can be a lot of fun. You have a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I never went to public school.
Okay.
Well, I went to, like, St. Vincent's, like, a Christian school when I was little.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never experienced any dating.
Mm-hmm.
So I have, like, no idea where I begin.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me's like, why would I even want to date? And part of me's like, like a mixed bag. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, so it's kind of hard, not in a bad way, to hear the dating thing, because I'm just like, I feel like a little kid in that area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not in a bad way, I wouldn't say, but it kind of brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah. Well, it starts as a friendship. So, like, if you, just like you're friends with the guys in this Bible school, right?
Like, what do you mean?
Well, like, Scott and I didn't start out dating. We started out because he was like a friend of our family and he was around. And we did not date in like very traditional, like, we're a boyfriend and girlfriend type thing. We just started out as buddies. And
brother and sister
kind of like that, yeah. Like, he was my brother's friend, and so we did things as a family. So, and I think, hopefully the Lord will make it really clear to you if there's a guy that, and hopefully the guy will make it really clear to you too. But I think just starting out as a friendship is a wonderful thing, because one thing is, I think people feel like it's important to date someone to really get to know them, but you can learn a lot just in a friendship. You can get to know somebody and you can see, hey, this person's really outgoing, this person's really quiet, and a lot of times opposites kind of complement each other. What I was talking about with Scott and I am a little bit, like, I'm an oldest. I like to have things, you can't tell because I was 10 minutes late today with no notes, but I like to have things organized, and I'm a little bit OCD, and before my kids I was way more organized. But I think I'm a little bit more structured is maybe more the word, and Scott's the baby of the family, and he's just all over the place. And he's organized and he's learned now because he's in his 40s. how to organize himself, and he can obviously, he does really well. He does a ton of ministry, and he runs his class at school, so he's organized now. But what I'm trying to say is our personalities are really different, but we really work well together. So as you keep growing in your faith and in your friendships, you might notice like, hey, I really like hanging out with so-and-so because this is really fun. It depends. Like I think sometimes introverts and extroverts kind of complement each other well. And then some people just really prefer being around someone who's similar to how they already are. So you don't have to start out jumping into some serious relationship. Not at all. I would say start out as friends because you get to know each other first. You guys were friends, right? You and Oscar were friends first? Mm-hmm. When did you guys start dating? Like in high school, right?
Yeah.
A while ago.
It was a pretty long time before we started, but we told each other we liked each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then we said, well, let's just stay friends for now.
Yeah.
Let's get to know each other because I barely knew him.
Yeah.
But I liked him.
Right.
But I wanted to get to know him first.
Right. That's smart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that kind of thing. You know, some Oscar type person may come in your life and you realize that you guys are hanging out and you hang out for a while and you don't even have to pressure yourself or feel like, oh no, you know, do I need to date this person? You can just get to know them and go from there. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
I grew up in a house where my dad was like, you know, they didn't want me like seriously dating people when I was really young. So I just was friends with guys, and I think that was a good thing. One other thing, and I know I need to keep going because I'm rambling, I can tell. What time is it? Okay. So I want to keep going, but one other thing I just want to say about the season that you're in of being in Bible school and of dating and of just your 20s and 30s. I feel like one thing I didn't really, I just didn't think about when I was in my 20s was the relationships that I was making, how they would probably last. I knew they would last, but like my friendships from Bible school, I'm still really good friends with those people. Like they were in my wedding, then now we've all had kids, and we still hang out and we still get together, and it's amazing. It's been 15 years or more. I don't remember. It's been a long time, and we still hang out, and it's really cool. And I think had I maybe been a little more cautious with how, I don't know, just thoughtful with my words and thoughtful with my time, it would have been really neat. I just was like so excited to be in Bible school, and I have a really big mouth, so I think I just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. My friends said that. They're like, you talked all the time when you first came, and I think I grew up a lot in that year. I was 18. So I learned a lot, and I look back at it now and I go, I wish I had been more intentional and thoughtful. Like I had this one roommate who drove me crazy in Bible school. She was so annoying. And I think I was kind of mean to her. And I look back now and I go, oh, that was so sad. But I was just, you know, I just was fresh out of living with my parents, and it was my first time living away. And I go, man, I wish I had just been a little more intentional with those friendships, because they are like lifelong. You don't realize it, but they very well could be. Okay. Any other questions about singleness? I feel like I'm an inadequate speaker in that subject, but the things that are important to take away is to be friends with the guys that you're with, and to just let the Lord work in your heart. And I think, and I'm going to talk about this at the end, but I feel like the most important thing is to be soft and pliable and let the Lord work on you, and not to be rigid and like, oh, this is where I'm going, God, this is what I'm going to do, because you never know. The Lord has plans for you, and if you can allow him, if you can flex when you feel him correcting you, or you feel him closing a door, even and you're pretty sure that door was supposed to be open, and you flex and you let your heart be soft, you're kind of laying the groundwork for marriage, and then you're laying the groundwork for having children. Not that you're laying it, the Lord's laying it in you, but if you're open to it. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? So I was looking up some of the verses about marriage in the Bible, and there's a whole lot in there about what a husband should be and what a wife should be. And I feel like in our culture, we kind of have some crazy views of marriage. I work in the hospital still. I got my nursing license now 10 years ago, and I've always worked a little bit. So I've always been able to keep in touch with kind kind of a group of non-believers in that way because I'm in the hospital setting. And so I've watched a bunch of them go through different marriages and things. And what I feel like people sort of view marriage almost like a Disney movie. And I have little girls, so I've been looking at the Disney movies to realize that I don't want them to watch the Disney movies because it's just so sad. I feel like in those movies you find, this is a view I think people have of marriage, is that you're looking for Prince Charming, and as soon as you find him, he's going to be this amazingly fit, chiseled, tall guy who's going to just like sweep you off your feet, and as soon as you have this amazing moment and you kiss, then all your problems melt away, and it's just wonderful. That's so like what Disney is teaching our little girls, which is why I don't want them to watch the movie, because it's so not the case. It's two human people that are totally flawed and not perfect coming together and trying to make a partnership, which is laughable because it's hard and it's not easy. There's nothing about it that's easy. But that's the first option that I think the world says the marriage is. It's sort of like Disney perfect. And the second thing I think people do, and I've noticed my coworkers do, is they just look for, if they can't find Mr. Perfect, they'll look for Mr. kind of good enough just so they can have a baby. And this sounds really crazy, but that's what happens. For me, a lot of my coworkers are like, okay, I'm in my late 30s. I haven't found Mr. Perfect. I'll settle for Mr. Handsome enough to make a pretty baby. It's really crazy, but it happens. And that's what they do. And so then they marry that guy kind of knowing that they can get a divorce and opt out. And then the third option is, well, I'll just choose whoever seems good because I'm really getting tired of being by myself. And then they pick somebody, and then that just, and that I think often it comes with the thought of, well, if it doesn't work out, that's okay because divorce is always an option. So the world, I think, has sort of almost, marriage has just become such a, I think it's just, not cheapened, but it's not the honorable institution that God created to be. It's just sort of this, I think it's either super romanticized like Disney, or else it's just really almost casual and almost like a relationship, not really a bond. And God says, the Bible says that marriage is to be honorable, and he calls us to love each other. And love is not Disney. Love is not this like perfect, you come together and everything just becomes harmonious. Love is, and I didn't type this out, so I'm going to read it to you. Love is work. Love is sacrifice. And love is, I know you've heard this because this is in everyone's wedding. Everyone always reads this. I used to have this up in my house because it's just good. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. It thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. And I think our culture, the planet we're all living in, that's not what people think of when they think about love. I think, like I said, I think they romanticize what it looks like to be together with somebody, because choosing to step out of your singleness, where you can control how your day goes and how you can control what you're doing with your life, and then choosing to partner up with somebody is a big deal, and it's not easy. It's a wonderful thing, and I don't think it's something to be afraid of. Sometimes people say, oh, I come from a broken home. My parents were divorced. I don't think marriage is for me. I'm afraid it's not going to work out. I think that God created it, and it can be a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. But I'm 12 years into it with Scott, and I just think it's just work. It is work to make it a beautiful thing. And the minute when I start getting lazy or not wanting to communicate or not wanting to give of myself to him is when we start getting distant, and there's kind of walls that get built up between the two of us, and then we have to turn around and go, wait a minute, we need to work on our communication, we need to be loving, and loving is sacrifice. So I think the important thing is you guys start looking at potentially marriages and then that if that's a step in your life, then don't think about love as what the world thinks about it. Go to the Word and say, okay, God, what do you say that love is? And when you think about it in that way, when you realize you're walking into a relationship with somebody where you're going to be sacrificing, you're going to not be, it's not going to be like you get married and then everything's going to be all about you, or it's going to be so much easier. It's going to be harder for a while because you're taking you, like I was taking me and all my feistiness and sassiness and rudeness and all the things that the Lord's working on in me, and then Scott was taking, Lord's taking all the things about Scott, and then say, okay guys, live together. I mean, it's kind of laughable. I really think that the Lord sometimes must smile at two people trying to work it out, because it's kind of funny. Because, it's like, I want to do things one way, and Scott wants to do things another way. I want to stay home and read books. I love to read. I like to be home. I like my tea. I like to go to bed early. And Scott was like, let's go mountain biking. And I'm like, I don't know how to mountain bike. Like, I don't mountain bike. I don't do that. So I remember when we were dating, he wanted to go on this crazy mountain bike, and I just wanted to stay and read. We were camping, and with his family and stuff. I just wanted to stay home and read my book. I brought this huge stack of books, and he's like, what are you doing? We're camping. And I was like, camping is reading books, like at the campsite. He's like, no, camping, like get your bike. And I was like, oh no. So we go on this flat trail, and I'm like, oh, this is fine. This is nice, And he goes, hey, we're gonna go up here. And I was like, no, I don't bike uphill. Like I don't know how. I can't do it. So he's like, no, it'll be great. Come on. So we start pedaling, and I'm like, I'm gonna have a heart attack. My heart was racing so hard, and I thought, he's crazy. I'm done. Like I'm quitting right now. He's like, no, it's fine. He literally pushed me up the whole hill. He put his hand on my back, and I'm like barely pedaling. I thought I was gonna die. And he just pushed me all the way up this whole crazy mountain. And I just remember getting to the top and thinking, this is nuts. Like I can't marry this guy. He thinks that I should go on mountain bike rides with him, and I just want to stay back and read my book. But he pushed me out of my comfort zone. And actually, he took me to the top of this really cool hill, come to find out, because he had almost died off that same hill in a car accident. So he took me to this old tree that had burned up where this car had exploded that he'd been in. It's a crazy story, you ask him sometime. But he showed me the spot, so it was special to him. So I was glad he pushed me up the hill. I was going to say, I didn't make it on my own. He pushed me up. But I feel like when I was thinking about like what love is sacrificing. Love is doing what your spouse wants to do when it's not something that you want to do. And I just think that the Lord puts us together often in relationships in life, not only in marriage but in friendships too, that just push us out of our comfort zone, where I would just stay home and read all the time. I would be the most boring person on the planet because I just love to be home and reading and drinking lots of coffee. That's just what I like to do. But I married Mr. Adventure, who's kind of got me to be stretched. So anyways, I think that another sad trend is that people, and I just mentioned this and I'm not going to dwell on it, but I feel like people, oh, there it is. I was like, there's one page missing. People complain about their spouses a lot, and I know you guys aren't married, and this is a talk for married people maybe, but when you do, it's good just not to complain about them. That just an encouragement that I feel like that's something our culture just likes to kind of complain about their spouse, and I feel like that's something really important to men is respect. Women really love to be women get fulfilled when they're loved and encouraged and filled up and told that they look lovely for the day and told that they're important and special and their husband loves them. A man really needs to be respected. It's really important. And I think, at least with the women I work with, that's like the number one thing is just they kind of cut down their family. And I know that that's sort of, when you're doing it and you're doing it, even if you don't think it's a big deal, when you're complaining about your husband or your children, even if you think, oh, it's just in the moment and I'm kind of joking around, it gets to your heart, and it really does kind of set, I think, like a root of bitterness in your heart. And so just encourage you that as God gives you more sweet relationships in your life, like friendships and your spouse and kids, try and make a habit out of not complaining about them. Because I found, like, when there's someone that bothers me, when I look back and I see, okay, I allowed myself the indulgence of complaining about this person, it made it worse. It didn't fix anything. It just kind of made me have a sour attitude. And I've noticed that with women, when they start to complain about their husband, it almost like really takes a hold and then it just undermines their relationship. So I don't know why that just came to my brain yesterday when I was typing these things out. See, I told you, Besta, that I was going to ramble. It's almost 4.
No.
Any questions about marriage or anything like that? Anything about marriage? I'm going to keep talking about kids, and then it's almost 4. I hope this is helpful. I feel like I'm just rambling.
No, you're not. What is your advice for a single person when they what is your advice? What they should look in a man?
Oh, like what kind of things to look for? I always said, and I told my sisters this, and my one sister's not married that I still tell this to, I feel like you need to have a must-have list and an optional list, right? So if you're looking for a car or, I don't know, a puppy or something, you kind of have your mandatory list, like he's going to be a believer, he needs to be, I don't know, for me, my must-have list was that he was fun and adventuresome and that he loved the Lord and that he wanted to have a family. Those were kind of like my main, like my must-have list. And then the optional things would be things like, I don't know, likes to travel or is funny or, that like I just think you need to kind of sit down and like be honest with yourself. Like what really is important to me and what are things that I know about myself that are going to be important in a partner for life, because it's okay to have a list. I know it sounds kind of corny, but I think it's good to have a list of things. Like these are things I'm not going to veer from. I'm not going to allow myself to go on a date with someone who doesn't love the Lord or who really says I don't want to have a family, and in my heart I know I want to have a family. So I think, and those are the kind of things you can determine when you're friends. Like when Lauren and Oscar were friends, if Oscar was telling everybody, I never want to travel, that's the last thing I ever want to do, I want to stay here forever. Well, maybe if traveling was really important to Lauren, she would go, oh, well, that's you can discover that about somebody without having to go on a date and become a couple or something first. It's kind of traveling is not the greatest example, but I think making a list is really important. I think, another thing is, my dad used to always say, if you're picking up apples, and if you're gonna, I don't know how he says it, if you're eating apples, you need to look and see where the tree that they came from, if that makes sense. Like, he would say, just because you can recognize a good apple doesn't mean that it came from, how does he say it? He's so good with analogies. My dad.
Tree, maybe?
Yeah, a tree, but I don't remember how he worded it, but basically that is that your spouse came from couple parents, they have brothers, sisters. When you marry somebody, you really do marry their family. And people who say, oh, well, he's not close to his family. His family's a mess, but he's not close to his family, so it's okay. Yeah, but like his parents are going to get old, and then you're going to probably have to step in and take care of them. And if they're not close to their family, why aren't they close to their family? Is there a really good reason for them not to be close to their family? So I think when you marry somebody, you really are marrying their family too. You're becoming a part of their family. And if you can't stand his dad, that's a red flag, because a lot of times guys end up, in some way, they're a little bit like their dad. Just like in some way we're like our moms. Maybe we don't want to be like our moms, but in some way we kind of go, I'm kind of like my mom in this a little bit. So it's important to see how they interact with their family. Are they disrespectful to their parents? Are they really disrespectful to their siblings? Because maybe then they're just acting right. How do they treat their moms? Because are they just acting really sweet around you, and then as soon as the honeymoon butterflies wear off, are they going to start disrespecting you? Because that's normal to them. You can't really hide how you act in front of your family, because your siblings will call you out on it. If I hung out with Scott and Scott was like, oh, Rachel, this, that, and the other, and I was pretending to be somebody I wasn't, my siblings would have just totally teased me and been like, are you kidding, Rachel? Give me a break. You're a horrible mountain bike rider. If I tried to, I love mountain bike riding, they'd be like, yeah, right, you're terrible. You don't do that. So you can't hide. They won't be able to hide who they are as much in front of their family.
I have a question. I heard from someone, an older lady said, when you are dating, look at that guy's mom relationship dynamic, because most probably he will treat you like how he treats his mom.
It's true.
Is it true?
I think so, yeah, for sure. My husband loves his mom, and he's really sweet. He teases her. He teases me too, you know. He gives us a hard time. But he loves his mama. He's so close with his mom. And he doesn't call. I mean, he forgot to even do Mother's Day with her. I gave him such a hard time. I was like, call your mom. But he's not like in a weird way loves his mom, like he's over there all the time. But he respects her. I think it definitely does show. It tells something about him, and also how he was nurtured and how he was cared for. It doesn't mean someone from a broken home, though, can't be a wonderful spouse. It doesn't, because the Lord can redeem all things. So I'm not saying, oh, he comes from a broken home or something, so don't even date him. Just get to know him and see how he interacts, and what is his view on his broken home. Does he see it, or does he think that that's normal? You know, and also who his friends are. And if you can't stand his friends, that's not good either. Because then if he thinks those guys are valuable and guys that he wants to spend time with, it tells of his character, you know. If he's spending time with people you think are really lousy and have no depth and are just lame, then you might question, well, what is his depth? Is he pretending to have more depth than he does? Or does he really have choice friendships? Those are all things to look at. And a lot of those things you can find out when you're friends. You don't have to have given your heart commitment to somebody to figure that out, you know. Another analogy that my dad, I think, or Scott uses, have you ever heard of the tape analogy? The sticky tape, ever heard that? I think I heard this when I was in high school or something, but someone said if you take 2 pieces of Scotch tape, 2 fresh pieces of tape, and you stick them to the table, and then you peel them off, and you stick them to your jeans, and then you peel them off, and you stick them to your phone, and every time you stick them and peel them off, they become a little less sticky, and they pick up a little bit of the dust and lint. And if you try and take those 2 pieces and you try and stick them together, they'll kind of start to peel because they've been stuck and unstuck so many times. And then if you take 2 pieces of fresh tape and you stick them together, you can't really get them apart because they've kept all their stickiness and they just glue together. So one good reason not to date a bajillion people, if you haven't already, is for that very reason, that if you you connect your heart with somebody so tight, and then you realize it's not the best choice, and you rip your heart away, and you do that over and over and over again, it will be harder, it'll just be harder to stick with your spouse when you finally do connect with them. Talking about kids just briefly, I think the Lord set up having families and children. He made this perfect plan that we would not just have kids and then babysit them or observe them or just kind of, what's the word? I feel like a lot of times people, again, when we think about our culture, people think that having a baby is just one more pretty thing to decorate and then put on Instagram. Like, look at my cute baby. But really, having children is an amazing process where the Lord's working as a mom, as a woman, the Lord's working on you all over again, just like he did when you got married. Now he's working on you again and taking you back down to your bare self and then building you up again. And I think too is that God gives you the authority as women, and you are the authority with your husband, obviously, but you are the authority in that child's life, and that's a big responsibility. So that's where you guys now getting filled up in God's word and getting excited about the future, it's laying the groundwork for maybe someday being a mom, you know? And your kids are going to look to you and say, oh, Mom, why, who's the devil? And why this? And you're going to be like, well, and so your kids are going to look to you as the authority in all this stuff. And it's so neat that you're spending the time now studying God's word and getting filled up, because someday you're going to have little people potentially that are like, why this, why that? And God says in Deuteronomy 10:19, I love this verse, that you shall teach your children, this is talking about laying up all the words in your heart and soul. I'll read in 18. Therefore you shall lay up all these words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and you should bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be the frontlets between your eyes, and you shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And I think that jumping into being a mom and dad, it's in our culture, I feel like it's one more thing to check off on sort of the ideal life, or a nice profile update, now I'm a parent. But God's called us to so much more, and he wants us to raise up his kids and disciple them and equip them and teach them, and it's such a huge calling, and it's such a wonderful blessing. And I think it's something to take. It's so easy just to get caught up in the stuff of it, or the sort of what the world thinks of it as just kind of one more accessory to life, but it's really a calling, and it's really an amazing gift and a blessing. So the last things, and then if you have any other questions, I was, like I said earlier, just to say, stay soft and flexible and pliable in these seasons that you're entering into. So right now in learning and in being in Bible school and surrounded by each other all the time and being around the guys, and just remember that the Lord is teaching you things and he will speak to you, and it's good to stay flexible and willing to change your plans if you think he's leading you one way or the other. And then I also said just being content. We don't have time, but in Philippians there's so many wonderful things that Paul talks, so many verses about contentment. I think that when I was 18, I thought, once I'm a nurse, I'm going to be content. Once I'm married, once I have kids, and then you just really realize that the Lord is working on you in every season, and it's really easy to get so caught up in looking at the future, and I still can be like this sometimes, that you don't enjoy the present. And every season is so special, and every season has really neat things that you don't want to miss because you're looking so hard for the next season, And then I just said at the end, living in a state of thankfulness. Have you guys read Ann Voskamp's book, 1,000 Gifts, or have you heard of it? Just really neat lady. She wrote a book called 1,000 Gifts, which I don't have time to really go into it, but it's just a really neat, sort of her story is she went through a really tragic event where she lost either her sibling or her daughter, and then kind of how the Lord took her through that, and she just slowed her life down and started being thankful for all the little things. And we just don't know what the future holds. I almost lost one of my kiddos, and it totally wrecked me. I mean, you just think everything's kind of going along so smoothly and fine, and then we almost lost one, and I just remember being in that ER thinking, this is not what I had planned. This was not on my plan for my life, God, and he just really stopped. Scott and I were both just doing so much, and it's like the whole world just went quiet for us, like, do you trust me? And I think that for me, I just had been sort of in this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do Bible school, and then I'm going to get married, and then I'm going to go to nursing school, and then everything was working out just great. And it's like, I think the Lord had to really get my attention and go, hey, do you hear my voice? Are you living each day for me? And are you keeping your heart flexible? And are you listening to my voice? And so when I look back on Bible school and getting married and all that. I think I'm so grateful to the Lord, and all those things have been such a blessing, but I go, oh man, I wish I had slowed down a little bit and enjoyed the ride. And it's easy for people to say that because it's like, oh yeah, easy to say, but it really is. Every season is so special, and not to be raced through, because God is teaching you things in what maybe seem like not earth-shattering days. You know, God might be teaching you as you work on your relationships with each other, or with your teachers, or with your friends, or with your family. All those relationships and things are kind of, like I said, laying the groundwork for what God has next. And so, do you have any other questions about anything?
What was the book called that you said?
Oh, 1,000 Gifts. Another really great book, and I almost brought them in, but another author that I love is Sally Clarkson, and she wrote a wonderful book recently called Own Your Life, and I go to her conferences, and I just love her, and she just wrote a wonderful book.
Let me know about her next conference.
Yeah, you should come with me.
I would love to.
Sally Clarkson, and she has a wonderful blog. And a lot of her stuff pertains to motherhood, but the Own Your Life book is not as much. She was a missionary back in Yugoslavia. She and a couple other girls were, is it Yugoslavia? Oh shoot, I can't remember. Poland, somewhere where it had just been, it was still very controlled by the government. They didn't want any Christians in there, and it was just kind of a crazy time. So she was like a young missionary, kind of excited about life and running around. Then she came back, she got married, and she was like, what? When she had kids, it was just very much like, oh, this is hard. And then she's encourages moms, and she's just really refreshing. So I love her books. And that's one that I think is really encouraging. But hopefully I wasn't all over the place for you guys.
No.
It's a lot of different topics
Rachel, I
to cover.
knew you were going to do a good job.